You're listening to the Believe in Giants podcast with two-time Super Bowl winner Carl Banks and the voice of the Giants, Bob Papa.
Another edition of Believe in Giants presented by FanDuel, along with Carl Banks, Bob Papa. So glad you can join us here as we get you set for the Giants and the Green Bay Packers at MetLife Stadium. The Mike Kafka era begins as he's going to get a 7-game audition as the head coach of the New York Giants. I spent about 15 minutes talking with him earlier this morning, and he's fired up and ready to go. So, Carl, tumultuous week, coaching change, everything. I mean, what's your feel here about where the Giants are at right now?
Well, they're where they are until they get it corrected. I think you'll see a productive offense, as they've been every week. It's going to be interesting, and this is actually a good view inside the mind of Mike Kafka, in that he's coming in with Jameis Winston. Now, he's worked with him obviously all year in camp, but game planning wise, let's see if things fit what Jameis can do. Or is it the Jaxson Dart schematic that Jameis has to adapt to? It's going to be really interesting to see, because Jameis has a skill set. He can drive the football. We know he's not anywhere close to being as mobile as Dart, but and then we're going to find out about this offensive line too. Like, this offensive line has improved. There's no doubt about that. But they've improved, and they got a quarterback who can escape. Jameis is not an escape artist. He can move around. He can navigate the pocket, but we're going to see how the protections mesh with the quarterback's ability. We're going to see how the offense schematically accentuates the strengths of Jameis Winston. That is where we're going to, this is just, you talk about an audition, he's going to be able to put some things out there where coaches that are interviewing can't, right? So he can show what adjustments he would make if he lost his quarterback. And he already made one decision, and that's, I'm going with Jameis over Russell. So that's that. But to answer your overall question, Bob, they're a 2-win team. They're going to be a 2-win team until they win their third game. Right. I expect to see offensive production. I'm hearing a lot of different things out of the defense, and some of it, quite frankly, makes me say, well, why? Why now? Right? Let me be on record. I am going to support and wish for the success of every coach on this staff, every one of them, and all of these players. I want them to be successful. But I listened to Shane Bowen, and he said, well, part of the reason Daboll is not here is because, we let some games get a go, and I feel, responsible for that. And then he talked about changing the scheme a bit, tweaking how they do things. And I'm like, okay, where was this after Dallas? And I don't know what those tweaks are going to be like. Most likely it's going to be with the mathematics. The personnel is what the personnel is. I don't think you've exploited the skill sets of the guys in combination like you should, but let's see. I'm rooting for them. But when he said they're going to have to change some things, tweak some things, tinker with the scheme a bit, that should be an ongoing process. And I talked about things after the New Orleans game. I talked about things after the Dallas game. And, people will think I never criticize a coach. I'm criticizing them as a collective, coach included. But when people say, well, you always criticize players, because they play. And if you can look at something I said about a player and tell me I'm wrong, then I will accept that criticism. Or if you can look at a missed tackle and tell me how that's the coach's fault, then I'm going to accept that. But I'm also going to tell you, just like last week, this defense never brought more than 4 people. They can't close out a game like that. They never changed the mathematics for Caleb Williams. That's coach.
Right. In that fourth quarter, they only rushed 4. Different combinations of 4, but only rushed 4.
But the math is the math if you're an offensive lineman. Right? They changed the math on Jermaine Illuminor, and they got the quarterback sacked clean with Gardner Johnson. So when I hear this from Shane Bowen, part of me says, thank you. Thank you so much. You got 6 games to really prove this now, right? But you still have to have players that have to execute as well. So collectively, they stink. Collectively, they have to clean themselves up.
I'm gonna steal one of your lines. 2 things can be true.
Yeah,
they didn't bring the math. They didn't change the math in Denver at the end of the game, right? So Bo Nix was able to sit back there. They didn't change the math on Caleb Williams, so that is true. But they also, Drew Phillips in Denver could have actually covered the guy, right? So 2 things can be true. The math was bad, but also the execution with the bad math wasn't good either.
Correct. So you've got players who've got to be better. They got time to do that. I want Mike Kafka to have a great deal of success because, look, people are floating a lot of names out there. He's been a finalist for a head coaching position for the last couple of years. I want him to have success. I want the decision at the end of his run here, at the end of the season, I should say, to be a tough decision for management. I want it to be one where they look at the progress, if there is any, from Mike Kafka and say, you know what, we got something here, let's go build on it. People keep talking about, or the public sentiment, they put a lot of different names out there. And a lot of those guys are highly qualified. Mike McCarthy's highly qualified. A lot of guys who are up-and-comers. But there's nothing like the guy on the job who can actually prove his point. He's getting the answers to the test early, if you will. Or he gets the test early. So I want him to have success, and I want the decision to be difficult, right? I want him to have success for several reasons. Because I also want the Giant fan base to have a level of, okay, he's not trash. Okay, he does have a plan. Because what the fan base has been through, just doesn't give them any level of optimism for anything that's on the staff now. I'm going to root for him to be successful. I'm going to root for Shane Bowen and his defense to be successful. But when you're way down in all of these categories, obviously change has started, and it'll probably continue. Once the season's over with, if you don't see dramatic change on the defensive side of the football. It's just that simple. Now, that being said, you have players who are all feeling a certain kind of way because, Coach Daboll lost. And, I heard Brian Burns was the last guy who should stand up and say, hey, look, it's my fault that the coach left. And that's leadership. But the way he's playing, if they had more Brian Burns efforts out there, the head coach probably wouldn't be fired, at least in season. But I admire him, because he always feels that he can do better. And I hope that sentiment is contagious throughout the locker room so that they can make something of whatever's left of the season.
Yeah, no, I know fans are excited about Jameis Winston. He gives great press conferences. He's singing New York from Hamilton. He's become a social media extravaganza during the Super Bowl and even before he signed with the Giants. He's kind of figured out that next phase of his life.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to go into this game like eyes wide open, right? And remember the fact that he's got 36 career wins and 51 career losses, and he's got 154 career touchdowns, and he's got 111 interceptions. Like, it ain't all going to be pretty. But I got a little nugget for Giants fans, a reason for optimism. He has started 2 games in his career against the Packers. In those 2 starts, played 3 games against them. In those 2 starts, 66%, 519 yards passing, 7 touchdowns, no interceptions. So we're looking for like a positive trend as far as Jameis Winston. Last game he started was December the 15th of last year in Cleveland against Kansas City. They wound up losing that game. That was the last game that he started. Carl, we talk about this Giants defense, right? And let's not be the get right game again. Green Bay in their last 2 games has turned it over 4 times. They're only 33% in the red zone. And in the last 2 games, they're averaging 10 points per game. Like, don't let them get going. Don't let them feel confident. They got issues at receiver. They're missing their best tight end. Here's the stat that really jumps out at me, because this has been a scary trend. Green Bay this season is 26th in the NFL. They're averaging 3.9 yards per carry. Jacobs hasn't really gone off. Kind of like we said about Saquon hadn't gone off until that second Giants
and
meeting.
Christian McCaffrey and you name it. Yeah.
And the Giant defense right now, that's an area that they're struggling. They are 31st in rushing yards per game allowed. They're dead last. They're giving up 5.5 yards a carry. And they're dead last. They've given up 46 runs of 10 or more yards. They've given up 12 runs of 20 or more yards and 2 touchdowns. What do they do this week that changes that narrative? I mean, there's only so many schemes you can call, but what do you expect? Because look, when the coaching change was made on Monday, everybody was kind of jumping up and down saying, I can't believe Daboll got fired. And how did Shane Bowen not get fired? And I think ownership's message to Mike Kafka coming in as the new head coach was, that decision is yours. You make that decision. We're not going to start firing people on the staff. You're the head coach. We'll see what happens this week. I mean, if it's more of the same, I would not doubt that Mike Kafka might make another move next week with somebody on his staff, right? I think.
Well,
he's in a audition for your job. You better win of these 7 games. You better win 4 of them at least to be in the equation. If you go 1-6 or whatever, you're not getting the job anyway.
Yeah, Bob. So what he has to do, and I think what I'm hearing is he's spending a lot more time on the defensive side. He's asking more questions. He's giving more input. I think that's important. From a player and coaching defensive standpoint, here's a note, which the Giants have not exploited. This is the 3rd game in a row where the opposing offense has an interior lineman who's out.
Yeah, the starting center broke his leg.
The starting center is out. I think it's third or fourth week where there has been an interior lineman out.
I'll give you the exact. I'll give you the exact, right? So Philadelphia, when they played them the second time, they were missing their starting center. San Francisco was missing their center and their left guard. Chicago also had an injury on the offensive line. So this week the Giants are going against a backup center because Jenkins broke his leg in Monday night's game against Philadelphia, the two-time Pro Bowler and 7-year veteran.
Right. So you've faced, this will be your fifth, basically, game with a weakness, an interior. And so just so that I'm clear, this doesn't fall on Dexter Lawrence. It falls on the defensive play caller because they're going to do whatever they can, meaning the offense, to neutralize, the Giants' best players. What are the Giants going to do to create the one-on-ones, right? Again, this is player and coaching. Are there interior games that they can run? I saw a lot of that in the Jets game last night where there were in-tackle twists, but they were inside. Instead of on the tackle, they were on the guard center. Or do you run games with your 2-3 techniques? There are a lot of things you can do. So it's not just on Dexter. If you can create the one-on-ones, great, but they all collectively have to be better. And this is, what are you going to scheme? Because you've had 4 weeks of backups. You couldn't tell. They ran the ball the way they wanted to run the ball. They passed the ball pretty much the way they wanted to because the talent that you have at pass rush could never really get going because you couldn't stop the run, right? So what can you do to make Jordan Love one-dimensional or make this game a one-dimensional game for Jordan Love? I think it starts with finding out who's weak on their team, right? Tight end's not there. Probably wipe your sweat off your brow because tight ends tend to have success on this defense. Your center is not there. The middle of their offense is not there. In the middle of your defense is your strength. How do you put strength on weakness, and what are you going to do to get them going, right? Scheme it, players execute it. That's what it really comes down to. Yes, it's going to start with coaching. How are you coaching? What are you scheming this, right? And then players, what effort, what execution are you put forth so that this scheme, whatever the tweak is, will be successful? Then my message to Cor'Dale Flott, my main man, I want you to pretend for 60 minutes this week, that you play receiver and you're a really good receiver. You're an all-pro receiver. I want you to pretend that in your head because every time that ball gets in the air, you should be making house calls. I went and looked at the Chicago tape. It was actually 3 opportunities for him. 2 were real legit. But listen, Cor'Dale Flott dropping interceptions is not the reason the defense is where they are.
No, he didn't get them better. He helped save the game against Philadelphia on that Thursday night with that interception.
So this is by no means shade at Flott. This is some, playful ribbing, but serious though, playful ribbing. Like, get them interceptions because something about that scheme enabled him to be in position to make them in his execution. But I would like to see that. That makes this defense look so much better when you can come up with those types of turnovers. But I'm interested to see how this defense adjusts their scheme, as the coach said. Like I said, my guess is that they're going to change the look up front. They're going to change the numbers, both run and pass. And if you can't stop anybody once they get to the linebacker level, sometimes it is easier just to line guys up in gaps. So we'll see if he changes the math up front versus run and pass, right? Predetermined gaps, send them there, and let guys. You're going to create one-on-ones when you do that. Also, your defensive backs have got to be better when you do those types of things. They've got to have a level of leverage in coverage that they can't compromise, right? So if you're going to run blitz or blitz versus the pass, assume there's going to be an audible, right? So whatever your leverage is, if it's inside technique, if it's outside technique, if you are the safety, you have a certain leverage you have to help versus certain things, y'all got to be locked in, because once they stop the run, then the quarterback's going to audible. You got to know what those adjustments are, and you got to play the leverage, predetermined leverage, and you can't be grabbing and holding. Meaning, Deontay, Drew, focus on your technique, because if they do what I think they're going to do, which means they're going to either run blitz or they're going to show a lot of different numbers, which is going to make some holes appear for the quarterback as he sees it. You've got to be able to prevent those guys from getting to those places with your pre-snap leverage. It's footwork and it's hands. Once you do that, your guys should be able to get home before that ball gets out. If you don't, there's going to be a catch, a run, a touchdown, a catch, a run, a 50-yard gain. But if you do it the right way, it's either going to be a catch, it's going to be a breakup, or it's going to be a quick tackle. But you have to be connected.
Yeah, my guess is if a Daboll can go, you'll be seeing, barring an injury, you're going to see a lot less Banks on the field. I think that's pretty obvious. The other thing, all right, Carl, like you mentioned leverage and all that other stuff. And again, two things can be true. I'm stealing your line again. You could talk about the numbers, you could talk about the scheme, but your big guys, meaning your big brand players outside of Brian Burns, dude, get the guy to the ground. The game in Dallas, he had chances. They didn't get Dak to the ground. They had chances to get Bo Nix. How many times are we calling the game in the booth and it's like, nearly sacked by Carter, nearly sacked by so-and-so, nearly sacked by Thibodeau. He gets away, he spins away. Like, man, you guys got to get your – that's why you're here. You got to close those plays out. And other than Burns, nobody's closing a play out.
Right. But here's the other thing, too. When you have a mobile quarterback, and Julian Love is mobile to a large degree, once you change the numbers, you kind of cage in the scrambler. And those types of plays are made now and not missed. Because when you're relying on 3, when you're relying on 4, you have to balance your rush, right? So if a guy beats someone to the inside and he nearly misses, that means the outside's wide open now. And so when you add an extra person, that changes things. And again, when you're just doing 4, it doesn't matter to the offensive line. They're just swapping numbers. Add Abdul Carter to rush and make it a 5-man rush and see what problems that causes. Add just rushing 4 and letting him, Burns, him and Thibodeau work some things. That doesn't change anything, right? They can switch it off. They can do certain things. That's why he's close but never a sack. Add him to the equation as a 5th rusher. Then you'll see something totally different. And here's the other thing too: if you get caught in a run blitz with a guy like Abdul Carter, and they decide to audible and check it to a pass, you just check to a pass rush. So your guys still stay intact. That's what has to happen, because you have that talent up front. You don't have a bunch of lightweights where, they're just going to get mollywopped if they get caught in something, a pass versus a run or a run versus a pass. If you have a plan and these guys go into the game and your coaches say, if it's run, here's what you do. If it audibles to pass, this is your check and we're still hitting the same gaps, it'll be okay. The burden is on your defensive backfield. They've got to line up in their leverage. And they don't even need to disguise it, Bob. When a quarterback sees the numbers up front, he knows the ball's got to get out of his hands quick, right? You line up in your leverage to show the quarterback, this is what we're taking away. It doesn't, you should never disguise, I don't say never, but you shouldn't disguise it, especially this group of defensive backs, because it's hard for you to bait anybody into anything, right? But once you put your alignment where it should be, the quarterback sees pressure and he sees, okay, these areas they're taking away from me. Ball's got to get out. So he's got to get to something that can get the ball out of his hands. And with your leverage, you know that it's going to benefit your defense. I would like to see that. Again, I'm anticipating, which I did last week, and it never happened. I anticipated some tweak to the front, some tweak to the scheme, and it never happened. And also, Green Bay's coming in with the same playbook as everybody else. Inside zone, toss, crack. So know how you can get rid of that inside zone. Add another number, or put your linebackers up closer to the line of scrimmage into a gap. Toss, crack. I mean, they hit you again last week, so we'll see what happens this week.
Yeah, I mean, look, the 07 Giants in big spots were able to rush 4, right? They moved Tuck inside, and then they had Fred Robbins, and then they had OC and Strahan on the ends. And they had a lot of success doing it. These guys aren't as good. I know everybody was all jacked up in the preseason. Oh, they're going to only be able to rush 4. It's proven that that's not the case, right? So you got to forget about what was said about what's the potential on the paper. Like, we could get there only rushing 4, and we can win and rush 4. And we're going to create unbelievable pressure. That's not the case. So you're right. Change the math, because rushing 4, you ain't getting home.
Well, the other reason Tuck, OC, Stray had success because they earned the right to rush the passer. They get stops in the run game that creates deficits for the offense, and that allows them to put their best 4 on the field.
Yeah, they weren't giving up 152 a game on the ground.
Correct. So that's part of the equation, but that's the thing I've been saying all offseason. I said they can be a very formidable front if they can stop the run. And they've never earned the right to rush the passer. I mean, it's unfortunate, because the investment on this team is on the defensive side of the football. There should be pressure on coaching, where they say, look, all this money we spending and this is all we're getting out of these guys, right? I mean, coaches got to coach players. The results are what they are, right? They are what they are. There's just no sense in, just going player for player, but they're a bad tackling team. They cannot stop the run, and up front, they have not been effective as a group. Coaching, has not helped them in closeout games. I don't think there's been a strategy, a practiced strategy of end-of-game situations. I know the offense have end-of-game situations, how they either want to close out a game or create more time to get back in a game. The defense, there is no strategy. There is no visible strategy of game closeout situations because it all looks the same from week to week. With the exception of what was it, the Denver game when they had 3 guys rushing and a bunch of guys back, but they don't look like they've been well rehearsed in those situations. It just all looks the same from first quarter to fourth quarter. That coverage looks the same. There's no emphasis on anything. And when there is, like you said, the Drew Phillips situation in Denver, that game could be over if he does one simple thing. They're in it together. We'll see what happens. Good luck. I'm rooting for him. I want Mike Kafka to have success. I want Jameis. If you're in a Giant uniform, I want you to have success. But me wanting it and you not executing it, just talking about it, it ain't going to change. And it would be a shame. I keep saying there's enough games left to make. So the mandate was that this team improve. The mandate wasn't make the playoffs, right? There's still enough games left on this schedule to show real improvement. Now,
well, they're almost halfway to showing improvement because the Giants of last year and the Giants 23 with all the different quarterbacks, but the Giants of last year, it was, can we get to 12 or 13 points in the game? How often are we going to actually get it across midfield? Like, since the Giants are 29th in red zone efficiency, right? Mm-hmm. Which is near the bottom. But here's where the improvement is. When Jaxson Dart plays in the 23 red zone opportunities with Jaxson, 14 touchdowns, 5 field goals, 2 downs, Scatterbo and Dart with red zone fumbles. They're at 61% touchdown rate. With Russell Wilson, they're at 18%. With Jaxson Dart, they're at 46% on third downs. He's 41 of 89. Wilson is 12 of 45, 27%. Right. So they're scoring more points. They're 14th in third down offense, which is more than acceptable. So we're seeing what you're talking about. But the problem is it hasn't been a complete scenario. And I talked to Mike Kafka this morning for about 15 minutes. That interview is going to air on the Giants platforms. And he said, I didn't want to. One of the things I learned is just don't come in and make change for the sake of making change like right at the beginning, because I'm going to take information in. We're going to see how this weekend goes. He said, but one of the things that I really wanted to drill down and study and try to find out, what are we doing, in looking at the blown leads inverted? What did we do in those games that enabled us to play really good defense and have these leads? And what are we not doing? What adjustments are we not making as the game unfolds to be able to close the game out? Because, as he said, in order to have these big leads, you played good defense and you're highly productive offensively. So what's happening that then it flips and then the bottom kind of has fallen out? So that's one of the things that he's trying to figure out and unearth.
I think that's a very prudent way to look at it. And it has to be actionable. I don't know if that was something that Coach Daboll did, or he tasked his defensive coaches to do that and come back to him. But they, insanity, it's repeating the same thing, expecting a different outcome. And so hopefully they are not repeating the same thing and the outcome will change. And then, one last, I would call it housekeeping thing, which it's a little bit surprising to hear. It's not a major piling on, but just the shots that Coach Daboll is taking in departure. You have one guy who says, and no disrespect to any of these people that are reporting these things or saying it. I know you guys got agenda, so go for it, but this is just an observation. Said that, Coach Daboll has an ego. Most coaches do.
There's not a head coach in the NFL that does not have some level of ego.
Right.
Okay. There's nobody in the NFL. There's not a GM or a head coach that has risen to that point that does not have an ego.
Right.
That's what helped them get there. Just like that's
Correct.
what helped guys make it to the NFL, and the guys that don't. There's an ego from within that believes you're the best.
Yeah. And so that part, folks, every coach and GM has an ego. Now, that ego can help you or it can hurt you. And, they have the courage of their convictions. They'll go down with that. So that's not a bad thing. It just, it didn't serve him, or the performance didn't serve him. And then the other thing was, one player said he yelled at Mike Kafka and threatened to take play calling away. That might be the most tender thing I've ever heard from a player to someone else. Coaches yell at coaches. That's what they should be doing. I wish he'd yell at Shane Bowen and threaten to take his play calling away when they were blowing these darn leads. And he has yelled at him. So again, you guys have, whatever points that you want to make. I don't want to call it agendas or narratives, but whatever points you're trying to make, a lot of this is just not that breaking, right? So coaches have egos, number one. Some egos serve them well until they don't. And number two, for a player to go, an anonymous player says that coach yelled at another coach and threatened to take his play calling away because a guy dropped the ball. That is so tender. That is such a coddled, but it explains a few things, right? Y'all report as y'all get it, but this is just my opinion. Just like you guys have opinions about a coach's ego and whether coach yells at somebody else, and you guys form opinions. My opinion is that's the most tender shit I ever heard a player say about a coach. He yelled at another coach. I don't know, but that's all I got on it. You guys continue to do what you do, but I just don't think there's no breaking news when you say that a coach has an ego. Obviously, Dave's ego worked pretty good with his offense, production, and things that were getting done. His defense, he probably should have had more of one, right? I think he should have been yelling more. He should have been demanding more of the defense. He's gone. But you know what? He's not a bad coach. He's a bad record. Has not been a good head coach. But I don't have many people who walk around saying Brian Daboll's a bad guy.
Well, look, Carl, let me just jump in here on the Jordan Renan report. The Giants deny that happened. Daboll, after his firing, has denied that it happened. Says absolutely unequivocally that did not happen. Mike Kafka has said that didn't happen. Now, listen, there could be a locker room lawyer. Like, I'm not saying that what somebody told Jordan Renan, they didn't tell him, but it doesn't mean that it was true. Because if you think about it logically, why would Daboll threaten to fire the offensive coordinator or take play calling away on the drop ball by Theo Johnson in Philadelphia at the 5-yard line, when in fact the call was good? They were going to have it 1st and goal at the 5, and the quarterback laid it right in there, and the guy dropped the ball. Like, if there was something about another play call, like if someone said, Jaxson Dart interception in Denver, which Daboll was 1,000% behind the aggressive play call, and he told us privately the very next morning, I'd do it again. I would do it again. But like if it was a play like that, then you could say, oh, well, maybe there was some, it wasn't.
And therein lies the ego, right? Where they have the confidence that's that.
But why would a guy get threatened to get fired for that was a great call, 1st and goal at the 5, and the dude dropped the ball? I can think of a lot of other calls that you could question during the course of the year. You say, what the hell were they thinking there?
Right. And then here's the thing. It's not for us to question whether or not that information came to Jordan and Jordan reported it. But it's more, to me, it's like, what kind of tender freaking guy would go and say something like that?
Yeah.
Like, what is that? Right? This ain't about Jordan. This is about who would actually say something that ridiculous about a successful play that was dropped by a player. But Jordan's reporting what he's getting. He's asking the questions. He's getting whatever answers they give him. But for a player, obviously he may not have liked Daboll, but you just embarrassed yourself.
Correct.
And you showed yourself as a little tenderling. Like, why are you feeling so goddamn tender that you want to take a shot and it's not even a legitimate shot at your coach, right? But I think, he's gone. There's a reason he's gone. They didn't win enough games. He was the head coach of the offense, the defense, and the special teams. And they didn't get collectively enough done, so the buck stops with him. He's gone. It's Mike Kafka's job. Rooting for Mike. I want them all to have success, but I just wanted to kind of toss that out there. It's kind of a, weird parting analysis of the head coach. Like, most of the stuff they've been saying about him and, things he hasn't done, it's been fair. But that one was a little off. And it's been denied by everybody. So,
yeah, Dabe's denied it, has denied it. Kafka said it didn't happen. Now, again, maybe someone, an unnamed source to Jordan, and he's like, all right, I'm going with this. But again, it speaks to a whole other point. Why that play? That makes no sense. And if you were that tender as a player or a member of Daboll's staff, like, either you're trying to stir the pot or you're a player that's like ridiculously tender. Coaches yell all the time. I mean, everyone loves watching NFL films and that old Giant stuff of Parcells chewing out Ron Earhart. How many times did he chew out Belichick? Like, in front of you guys, right? I mean, hey, that's the NFL, right? It gets heated and it gets hot and it gets intense.
Yeah.
And you're right. Daboll's gone. He was 20, 40, and 1. He was 11 and 33 over the last 2.5 years. It is what it is at this point. And I don't think most Giant fans are getting caught up in any of this stuff. I think they're excited to see what's going to happen. I think everybody's praying that Jaxson Dart successfully and health-wise winds up clearing the concussion protocol at some point. Is he back next week in Detroit? Do they wait until the Monday night game again? We want to see him back on the field, but we want to see him healthy. And he gives the Giants the best chance to win. And, hang on for the ride that is Jameis. He might throw for 411, and he might throw 4 touchdown passes, might throw 3 interceptions. It's going to be entertaining. But I would think that maybe they're going to go look at Jameis Winston. What did Sean Payton do with Jameis Winston when he played his best quarterbacking? Not throwing, not fantasy football, 500 yards, 5 touchdowns, and all that other stuff. When Jameis Winston played quarterback the best of his career in the National Football League. And that was under Sean Payton, where they played it very conservatively. They played it smart. He was 5-2 in 2021 before he got hurt. He had 14 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He threw for 1,100 yards in those 7 starts, and it was a tempered Jameis Winston. And I would assume that Tim Kelly, the new offensive coordinator, and Mike Kafka are looking at some of that stuff, say, okay, how was it that they made Jameis play quarterback, not play stat guy? We'll see what they do on Sunday.
Yeah, I'm rooting for him, man. And, you know, because Mike Kafka got the test early, he understands his personnel. I want him to knock it out the park. It's point blank and simple. And, you know, I want the consternation to hit this fan base. Is like, wait a minute, are we getting rid of our best guy? Right? Is he our best guy? Look what he did. Now, I want that to happen. And I want the fans to really feel like, okay, this is just not a throwaway 6 games. This is, you know, this guy is really putting some stuff out there to show. And he got the test early. So hopefully he aces it.
All right. We'll be back with a recap on Monday. How do we like to? Well, make sure you go get yourself a mug, a Tell a Friend mug, get yourself a tumbler, a ManjaCast tumbler, whatever you want to do. But how do we like to end this thing?
Tell a friend to tell a friend. Believe in Giants.
In Giants.